What's up, family? Hope all is well with you today. Strat here from Strategic Audio, back with a brand new video. Once again, gonna be no time wasting. Today's video is gonna be a little bit different from my usual production videos. See, today we're gonna be going over 3 simple ways to improve your loops and samples and perhaps your beats. Now, if this sounds like something you might appreciate, please drop the video a like and consider subscribing if you really want to support the channel. It helps out so much. Alright, so let's get into it. First thing I want to talk about is sound selection. Sound selection is critical and it is essentially the first stage in the process. It can either set you up for success or failure. Always be mindful of what your intended goal is. In other words, the sounds you select will change depending on what you intend the final product to be. So for example, are you trying to make something artsy and experimental? Are you trying to make something that's billboard ready? Or are you making something that's supposed to be soulful and vintage? The sounds you choose need to fit the intended genre and purpose. And even within that, they need to sound as high quality as possible. Your inputs into the process must be sonically and musically sound in order for the final product to also be sonically and musically sound. So whether you're recording a live sound source and you have to choose the right mic placement and the right gain staging, or you're using samples on one-shots or VST instruments, always take the time to focus on your sound selection. Next on the list, let's talk about chords and your chord progressions. Now, there are so many things we can say about chords, and what I will say, it really helps if your chords are lush, rich, and interesting rather than oversimplified and honestly a little bit boring. Now, honestly, this tip might be slightly more skewed to someone who's making soulful, jazzy, or vintage samples, but I truly believe the principles can be used for many styles, including like EDM and just straight up raw hip hop. So imagine you're making a simple chord progression based in the C minor scale using a good VST, remember sound selection, like Piano Tech 8. A very basic way to play it would be something like this. So the chord structure here goes from C minor to B flat, B flat again to A flat, B flat again back to A flat, and ends off on the G minor 7. However, if you wanted to make it a little bit more interesting, you could, for example, turn that first C minor chord into a C minor 9th by playing these notes. Watch carefully. Piano Tech will even show you the actual chord names so you know exactly what you're playing. So then that initial simple kind of bare bones chord progression can become something like this. So this chord structure starts on the C minor 9 to the B flat, stays on the B flat, goes to the A flat major 9, back to the B flat, back to the A flat major 9, and ends off on the G minor 7. So what this does is the slightly more complex chords add a fullness and a richness to the composition that simply wasn't there before. And that simply makes the overall sound fatter, bigger, richer, thicker, all those words that you can use to convey the idea that you are hearing a wider and a more impactful sound. Also, and this is a little bit of a bonus tip, look at the cadence and the way I played the chord progression. Now, you can do really simple chords and you just dropping it in on every beat, like a really basic way to play your chords, and that can work sometimes. Go back and take a listen to the rhythm and cadence of the way I play the chords. Personally, I think it pays to do something a little bit off kilter or out of the ordinary with the rhythm of your chords That simply just makes the chord progression more interesting if it's a little bit unpredictable what you're doing. Using sometimes unconventional or unpredictable cadences and rhythms for your chord progressions can really make a more interesting overall final product. However, you can't go too overboard with it. It still has to make sense, and it should still be something that the listener can easily catch on to and get in the groove of it as it repeats. So it's a balance that you have to strike, but that's just a quick bonus tip to add on to the idea of making bigger, more complex chords, and then in doing so, perhaps experimenting with the way you play them, the rhythm that they're played in, mixing up sustain with staccato is all interesting ideas to make your final sample, loop, beat, whatever it is, a little bit more interesting. So the final concept that I want to talk about here is layering. Layering is an extremely important part of the whole music production process, in my opinion. You can fill up the entire frequency spectrum while not making your composition too busy and confusing by layering your main chords with other instruments that have different tones and textures, or might be at a higher or lower register. Take this organ from Analog Lab, another great VST, remember, sound selection, for example. Now let's hear it layered with that fatter piano chord progression that we just played. Alright, we're making progress. Now let's see how it sounds with some strings from the BBC Symphony Orchestra by Spitfire Audio, played on top as kind of a harmony. Having a few instrument layers carry your main chord movement gives your composition a strong backbone or foundation, if you will. So let's add a bass next to kind of cap off the whole layering idea. For this one, I used a really cool sound font. I've talked about this sound font in previous videos, and it's just a really nice bass sound. So rather than add a bunch of competing melodies, perhaps fill up your frequency spectrum from the high end to the low end with complementary layers, and then perhaps think about adding a top line or a counter melody or both. So I went ahead and I added this guitar melody. It's a bit of a counter melody to the main chord movement, but I think it fits fairly well. So remember the 3 steps. Number 1 was sound selection. I chose high quality VSTs and my own electric guitar that is fed directly into my audio interface, so no miking up of any amps. Number 2 was chord progressions and making them more interesting. I chose to play more complex chords to make it fuller and richer. And I chose to play in a more interesting, less obvious type of cadence. And last but not least was layering. I added instrument layers to reinforce my main musical idea, and that filled up the frequency spectrum. Then I added a counter melody. Alright, so here is the final result of that process. Alright, so that was just a really basic illustration of 3 simple ways that you can use to improve your loops, samples, or beats. I thank you so much for watching. Your support truly does mean the world to me. I hope that you found this video at least somewhat helpful, and if you did, consider liking the video and maybe even subscribing. Peace out and have a great day, and hopefully I'll see you in the next video.